Okay, I'm going to describe the brain structures involved in memory formation and retrieval. And there's several of them. So the first one I want to talk about is the hippocampus. I don't have any pictures, but if you're interested, just Google it. It's really easy to find. So the hippocampus in particular is needed to establish new declarative memories. And I talked about declarative memories as being like information based that's directly available to the consciousness, and you can express it as language. So the hippocampus is involved in this process of establishing new declarative memories, and it also plays a role in the short-term storage and consolidation of this declarative information. Because if you stop and think simply about memory for a second, and you think about all the different stimulus you're exposed to in any given day, there's so many things going on. There's so many thoughts you have. You have, probably, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but millions, maybe even more thoughts a day, okay? And all those thoughts have to be, broken down into different areas. Is this important? Do I want to commit it to long-term memory? Is this something useful? Is this something I don't care about? Is this a passing thought? Is this something about my past? Is this something about my future? I mean, you have all these thoughts, so you got to have a way of kind of consolidating that information, okay? Consolidating what's important, sorting it out. And the hippocampus is involved in this process of consolidation. So a good deal of evidence also implies that the cerebral cortex, okay, it's kind of obvious that the cerebral cortex will probably play a major role in long-term, and so it's a major long-term repository for declarative memory, okay? So the cerebral cortex is kind of like your filing cabinet for long-term memory. Anything you want to actually commit to memory, anything you practiced over and over again to commit to memory is going to probably be stored in the cerebral cortex. This information was discovered by studying patients undergoing electroshock therapy. Okay, so people were getting this electroshock therapy, and then they were kind of investigating what's going on with them. And, what they were finding were they had this, form of amnesia. Okay, they couldn't remember. They were in the loss of memory. And this loss of memory actually, the area that was damaged was the cerebral cortex. Okay, and after the treatment, so they found that the region of the brain that was affected was the cerebral cortex. And that's kind of how they started discovering. That's a lot of the ways this stuff in neurobiology and neuroscience is actually discovered. You find people who have some unique injury, okay? Somebody's had a brain injury. Somebody's had a stroke. Somebody has had a limb removed. A very fascinating book is called Phantoms of the Brain, I believe it's called. And it really goes through all different kinds of situations where people had, phantom limbs. They had all kinds of different problems. Some of them had, types of epilepsy where they had these epileptic seizures, and then they assumed that they were God, and all kinds of very strange things. But a lot of times this is how these things are developed. We find out through people who are injured who seek help. And it really becomes very, very interesting. So another area is the prefrontal cortex, okay? And the prefrontal cortex is directly involved in working memory. Okay, so the prefrontal cortex is directly involved in working memory. Remember I said that was the ability to store information for, seconds to minutes after the present moment has passed. So this prefrontal cortex plays a role in that process. And it's also the executive area of the brain. And we call it the executive area of the brain is because that's where decisions are made. Okay, it's the part of the brain where what information should be stored and what information should be removed is decided upon. The brain kind of makes these decisions. You kind of make these decisions. I would assume, both consciously and subconsciously make these decisions in a sense. You don't necessarily always think about them, but, you kind of know what's important and what's not. So you need this area of the brain in order to sort through that information.